I'm confident that if I had run again and articulated it, I think I could have mobilized a majority of the American people to rally behind it.
President Barack Obama, in an interview with David Axelrod, a friend and former advisor this week, expressing confidence he could have defeated Donald Trump in a hypothetical third race for a third term. We're now back with the panel. Charles, what do you make of that?
Well, you know, it's another example of the president saying basically the problem here was that the American people weren't listening enough to me. Because, of course, he did campaign. He campaigned very hard, and it was a referendum on him. And it was a rejection of not only, a rejection, not only of Hillary Clinton, but of 8 years of President Obama's policies. He will always go down as a successful president in his mind because he won re-election, and that was great. But it was at a grievous cost to his party, and I think the things that he was pushing.
Well, the vice president, in an interview with the LA Times, had some interesting thoughts on exactly what happens with the Democratic Party, where they may have missed it on this. He says, quote, "I believe that we were not letting an awful lot of people, high school educated, mostly Caucasian, but also people of color, know that we understood their problems." And he also talked about, quote, "a bit of elitism that's crept in to party thinking," Daniel.
Yeah, he also, in that same interview, talked about how equality doesn't actually feed people. So I think he really gets at the heart of the Democratic problem. And look, Barack Obama's he's never lacked confidence in his own abilities, obviously, and that's helped him tremendously in a certain way put himself forward. But the recognition of what happened to his own party, what limitations their agenda and how far left they went and how it prevented Americans from their policies addressing Americans' needs, I think really needs to, in their comeback, and there will be a comeback on the Democratic side, they really need to recognize those shortcomings and provide and offer a solution to the American people.
Well, and a lot of folks look at the lobbying and jockeying for the head of the DNC, Julie, and they look at some of the people who have been in that mix, Representative Keith Ellison, Secretary Tom Perez, and say, those are not the most moderate people in the party. Does the party not get that maybe average Americans don't want the far left progressive agenda? As Daniel referenced, they want to feed their families.
To me, the chairmanship of the DNC is only important in that it has to be somebody who understands the mechanics of how to campaign and get out the vote. What the ideology of the DNC chairman is to me is largely irrelevant in the face of that. What is relevant to me is the message that Democrats are putting out, to the extent that the vice president talked about, that Democrats, for lack of a better description, feel the pain of the people out there. And I took some onus on myself as well. After the election, it is very easy for me, sitting in New York or in Washington, to go and say, well, look, so many more people have health care thanks to Obamacare, not understanding that many of those people are also paying a lot more money out of pocket for that health care. Very easy to say millions of jobs have been created, despite the fact that people are saying these are not the kinds of jobs that we want. And so there was a failure of communication, I think, and to some extent he is right, some elitism when it comes to being condescending and trying to tell people that their life is great when they personally did not think their life was great. And I think I took responsibility for that right after the election. I think more Democrats need to look in the mirror and do the same. Going forward, that's what the party needs to communicate. There are people in places like West Virginia or Kentucky who are about to lose a tremendous amount of health care if they repeal Obamacare. And those are the people that voted for Donald Trump. The Democratic Party needs to explain to them why those policies are harmful to their own interests. That's what needs to happen. We can't keep talking in the mirror about how great things are, when for a lot of people they're not that great.
Well, and on the issue of Obamacare, I want to play a little bit of what House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi had to say, because we know this is one of the big upcoming fights on the Hill.
You're always listening, but it's not in it to dismantle. If it's an existential threat to the access to care in our country, that would be a problem.
Lisa, she says they'll be listening, but they're not going to get on board with dismantling.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's at least 10 senators that are running for re-election in states that Donald Trump won, 5 states in which he won by double digits. But what's interesting, if you remember, Senator Chuck Schumer, before the 2016 election, had alluded to the fact that Obamacare was a mistake because they should have focused on middle-class voters and policies that embittered their lives. So if you remember, before 2016, he had made that comment that was a mistake. But to President Obama's point, I think his comment really came from a place of insecurity, because for a guy who's been so focused on his legacy and someone who has done the most of his legacy by executive fiat, whether it's the Paris climate deal, the Iran deal, a lot of it's going to be eradicated. And so the great irony here is the fact that we have a president who's been so focused on his legacy and done so much in the name of legacy, whether it's Guantanamo Bay, whether it's the withdrawal of troops from Iraq. But much of what he's done is simply going to go away because he lost the election. And the only lasting legacy that he really has, Obamacare, was done on a strictly partisan basis, which we've never seen before with a major entitlement, whether it's Medicare, Social Security, even Medicare Part D. So I found that to be really interesting from his comments. But I do think that the Democratic Party needs to refocus its message more largely speaking.
Well, and Daniel, to the point of that, so much of this was done through executive action and fiats and those kinds of things that can be undone. It's a much tougher business to get up there and legislate, make the sausage on the Hill. Will a President Trump be different in that respect?
Well, that's the question, right? Republicans have gotten very good at being in opposition, and they were very good at sniping. Can they actually govern? And when they repeal Obamacare, and I think they will, as they promised to do, they then take responsibility for the entire healthcare system, much in the same way that President Obama did when he implemented Obamacare. So it's going to have a reverse effect with people losing their current health care plans, huge upheaval in a massive sector of the economy, and it really creates a huge problem that's looming right ahead for Republicans.
All right, raise your hand if you really think they're going to repeal it, because you said you think it gets done
do.
too.
I think
They repeal it and delay it, I believe.
But to replace it, they're going to need Democratic
Take a
support.
lot of work. All right, panel, thank you very much. We will see you next Sunday.